Once you've done design research, you need a way to synthesize that information and succinctly communicate it to not just your design team, but any other stakeholders in the project. One way to do that, and a common way that designers do that, is through user personas. A persona is a tool that we use to keep our work human centered. It helps us practice that human centered design outlook. And it boils down all of the things that we found in our interviews and surveys into one artifact that kind of describes the gist of what we found. And it personifies all that information in a way that keeps the human top of mind as we're designing so that we're continuing to practice empathy as we're making more design decisions. A good framework to think of this in comes from Cheryl Kababa. This quote, as a individual, I want to do something so that I can achieve something. And if you're filling in those blanks, you can start to think about what that persona might be. So, for example, if we take something like Google Drive, might have a variety of different types of users. So, two very different users might be the student and the office worker. So they have some similarities. They both want to organize files and content, but they're very different individuals and they're both trying to achieve different things. One of them needs it for schoolwork, the other one needs it to collaborate with colleagues. Personas always include information that's relevant to the design context. That's a word that keeps coming up, context, and it changes from project to project. So, what is a good user persona in one project won't necessarily be the right framework for another one. So, you need to think about how are you going to define the context surrounding your design challenge. So here's an example of what these might look like. This one comes from the Interaction Design Foundation. You'll notice it has an image of a person, gives them a name, and there's this tagline called Casual Audiophile. So this design project, if you read through the information here, you can start to figure out that this is about music streaming. Specifically, they're talking about how these users interact with Spotify. So some of the things that are synthesized here are where this person is online and how much they use the internet and technology in general, how casual or hardcore of a listener they are, what influences their musical taste, how they interact with the app, their goals and motivations, and then they have a summary of the story. So those few paragraphs there kind of create this fictitious background based on the research to make Rebecca seem like a real person that the design team is creating something for. This is another example. You can see this is a much more simplified draft of a user persona, but it's still super useful. So you can see this person is a reliability researcher. They have a quote here that kind of summarizes their guiding motivations. So she says, I couldn't believe it. My dishwasher died right after the warranty ended. It felt like betrayal. Now I do homework before I buy. And as we read through this user persona, we can see that this is describing how this type of person or category of customer shops. So in their behaviors, it says they take several weeks to make a decision when they're shopping for appliances. They start out by comparing products on third-party sites like Wirecutter or Reddit, and they keep a detailed sheet of the products that they're shopping for. So they're a very meticulous shopper. And you can think about how another persona for this particular design challenge might be like the impulse purchaser. And they might behave very differently, have different core needs, and have a different potential demographic. Another similar one, you can see how demographics seem to be important in this one. This is about car shopping, and so including the status of Melissa's family and the people that she's shopping for is an important part of this persona. So, what makes a good user persona? Well, the first thing is that it's always based on authentic research. If you're just pulling a persona or making up facts out of thin air, it's not very helpful. You can't make up the important parts of your persona or base them on assumptions because that's not validated research. And the whole point of this is to make sure that we are not designing on assumptions. We're always thinking about the actual end users of our product. A good persona also only includes relevant information for the design task. So you need to paint a full picture of the person. You want to be able to think of them as a character, but you have to keep it focused. You only want to include the bits that are really helpful for the design team. And lastly, you can use as many or as few personas as are necessary to summarize your research. So as you start to synthesize your information, everybody might be telling you kind of a similar thing, and maybe that tells you that one user persona is enough. Or you might be seeing different categories of respondents emerge, and maybe that tells you that you need to separate your personas into designing for a few different users. There are some common mistakes to look out for here. One is your user persona becoming too full. You can see just how cluttered this one is. If it's too dense, it's unlikely that the designers will return to it to keep this person in mind. So you need to make sure that you are focusing the information you're including. It's not that there's not good information here, but it's a little too dense to be helpful. Two is including information that isn't relevant to the design challenge. You start to read through this user persona example, you'll see that this design challenge seems to be focused on a platform for selling ads or advertising. But they're also including things like motivations in terms of being eco-friendly or how social they are or their favorite sports teams. These are things that aren't relevant to the design challenge. So if we're designing an advertising platform or a ticketing platform, we only need to include the things that are relevant for that task. And this one isn't necessarily a bad persona, but it's important to keep in mind that you should keep the user persona functional. Visual appeal is great. It makes the persona much more usable. It shows that you can design information well. But that's not the point of it. So keep your focus on the importance of summarizing the information and personifying what you found in your research, and put a little less effort towards the visual appeal of it. A good place to start if you're not sure what's important to include is a name, an age, and an image, just to kind of make this thing human. A tagline or a user category in order to describe that type of user. Include their experience and relevant skills. Some context to indicate the interaction that they'll have with the scenario or product that you're designing. Goals or the use case. Pain points specifically, oftentimes you'll get pain points out of your research. Those are important to include. And if you have any particularly relevant or telling quotes from your interviews, those are a great thing to put into your user personas. So as you look through your research, start to look for patterns. And in those patterns, see if you can distinguish different groups of people that you're talking to or specific motivations that people are talking about. So it's never as clear cut as I'm describing here, but as you start to work through it, you'll be synthesizing your information and boiling it down into a framework that is easy to communicate and to put into user personas, which will be helpful in the design stage.